Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you for taking the time to join the call and participate in this WebEx that we're providing today. My name is Steve Gill from BTB Security. We are a security services firm based out of Philadelphia and Chicago. If you've attended one of our webinars before, please bear with us while we go through the introductions. And like I said, I just really appreciate you taking the time to spend the morning with us before lunch on the call today. So who are we? We are, as I mentioned, BTB Security. We are a company that was founded in 2006, and we're focused on information security and digital forensics. The reason why we decided to found this company was we wanted to make sure that as an independent company, we weren't beholden to other types of requirements such as selling additional hardware or other things that may compromise the integrity of the advice that we give or the assessments that we perform. And we take that very seriously, and about 7 years ago, that's the reason why we went about putting this company together. And it's run by 4 individuals, Brian Bailey, who is a CISSP and CCE, Chris McGinley, who also holds his additional credentials, Ron Schlecht, and myself, Steve Gill. We all have similar backgrounds from not only big 4 organizations and large organizations, but holding different roles within those particular organizations. So while we've done things like pen tests and assessments in the past, we've also had responsibility for managing different information security programs, whether that was the corporate information security program or programs for additional customers, making decisions on purchasing items and policies and procedures. And one of the things we like to say is that we spent time in your chair with some of the responsibilities that we have, and we think that is very important in terms of trying to make the best recommendations possible. And that's the reason why we're here doing this job, is that we feel like we have the capability to give great advice, be someone that you can ask questions to, and give realistic answers. So that's basically just a little bit of the background on who we are. So what are we doing here today? Why are we discussing war stories? I'm sure you saw the emails that went out, a little bit of the background information, but quite frankly, we've been doing penetration tests for a long time. We've done several hundred penetration tests individually. We don't have an exact count, but we've done quite a lot of them with a lot of different stories that we have with a lot of different organizations. We've spent time working with a couple branch credit unions to Fortune 500 companies, healthcare organizations, financial institutions, manufacturers, anybody with proprietary information, just people that in general are interested in improving their information security or trying to deal with a regulatory compliance issue. So we've done a lot of work, and one of the things we think is that the stories that come out of it have a lot of power. And the reason why we believe that is that it's a concrete example of what can happen. You kind of remove this whole theoretical part out of the conversation. When we're doing other types of work with our customers, whether that was in the past or even today, and it's not a penetration test necessarily. There's a lot of theoretical conversation that goes on. You may describe a vulnerability, and the question goes back and forth to say, well, what does that really mean? What can you do because of this? When you do a pen test, it's just a different perspective, and you do exploit the vulnerability. You do take together a series of events and turn them into a compromise or an extraction of data. So it removes that theoretical part out of the conversation. And that's not to say that other methodologies aren't powerful. They're necessary. They may be more comprehensive in terms of collecting data or setting strategy. But in terms of what does this actually mean, it doesn't become a theoretical conversation. It really becomes a lot more concrete there. And we're also discussing, because it's not always about, hey, look what we did and it's successful and we were able to break into something. We also want to talk about the interesting things that our clients have done to stop us. And we think that's important too, is that even though we have a lot of success in doing pen tests, we think there are some great news stories to talk about that maybe those lessons learned from that particular story can help someone else in terms of implementing a solution. So we want to be able to talk about some of those things and some humorous stories along the way of things that we've done. For me in particular, some interesting and embarrassing things that have happened, and talk about how we got past that. So the first story we want to talk about today is a physical security story. The goal of which is to just basically breach the building security and secure a seat in office or a cubicle, conference room, somewhere in which you can either gain additional reconnaissance or start conducting an internal technical penetration test. But when we do this type of work, there are times where they say, hey, you know what, we have badge readers, we have guard stations, we have different things in place that help make sure that our employees are safe and that only the people who can get into the building are people who are authorized to be there. So as part of it, they ask us, can you break in? There's a lot of work that goes into this as opposed to just showing up and trying to walk into a building. There's a lot of reconnaissance that can be done beforehand, and I'll describe a couple of those things, and some of which are a little more new in terms of the technology. We've been doing, like I said, we've been doing this a long time, but there's been a lot of advance in the types of imagery that's been kept. So, for example, I'm showing you a Google Maps with satellite imagery put on there, and this is not a client of ours. I just picked something at random off of Google Maps, and we'll talk a little bit about what we see in there. But there's other types of reconnaissance that could be done. Taking a look at the automated attendant from the phone system. It's a great time to call after hours when you can guarantee there's no receptionist there, and see if there's a dial by name, if there is a directory listing or any other type of function that we can use in order to start gaining some intelligence information about the organization. Examples include just finding out names. Is somebody on vacation? Are they on leave? There's a lot of great information that you can glean that may be useful for you when you're trying to break into an organization, both either from a technical standpoint or a physical standpoint, as we're addressing here. Reading press releases on the website for publicly traded companies, looking at their disclosure information. There may be some interesting information that you can use in order to try to learn about the business. Any information that you can glean is important in terms of trying to put your attack together. And then also learning the dress code. It could be as simple as doing a drive-by, looking up, looking at the people going into the building and seeing how they're going in. You may want to blend or you may not want to blend depending on the situation. A great example is in manufacturing plants where you may have a more casual dress code. People may be a little more intimidated to talk to someone in a suit, whereas in a business casual environment, someone in a suit may stick out like a sore thumb. So it just depends on the situation, learning about the industry that you're working with and understanding what may be an appropriate dress to use in order to try to either blend in or keep people at bay, depending on what type of attack you're trying to do. But all of this is trying to plan the attack in advance. Like I said, gain a lot of information that you possibly can in order to help you begin an attack. So let's point out a couple things about this particular picture if you're doing satellite reconnaissance. In this particular building, you can see that there are a lot of trailers along this area. So you can see that there are many loading docks. You could expect that there will be people at different times working to either load or unload. These particular areas appear to be ramps that would be associated with maybe an alternate entrance in order to come in and out of the building to work with that particular dock area. You can imagine that at a busy time, this door could be opened and closed or potentially propped open at different times. In this particular area, we're looking at what could be most likely the main entrance because we have general parking in this area. Looks like some manicured area with a walkway going into here. And you could maybe with zooming in a little more or a bigger picture see that there would be fencing coming into this area along with the road that follows back into this particular area, which may either be a guarding station, maybe checking the bill of ladings for the trucks coming in. It could be just security, or as I mentioned, a weigh station. But this may be a checkpoint in which it's the potential area for someone to walk in, but they may have to be cautious and understand how they want to move into this area to potentially walk back and either look at these loading docks, come around the side in which there are more trucks and additional loading docks, and attempt to gain access into the building. One thing you probably don't want to do is just immediately go into this front entrance because you will most likely have a reception area or a type of man trap or vestibule area in which someone may be blocking access with sign-in sheets, and they may be more prepared at this area for visitors or trying to shun away anybody who's trying to get into the building. So just looking at it for a couple minutes, it's a couple pieces of information that you can glean off of it, and it helps you plan that attack in advance and be more prepared. So what was learned via our reconnaissance of the particular client in question, and then we're not looking at the satellite imagery from before, but this is related to the story. When reading through some of the news stories, we found out that the company recently made an acquisition. So there's an opportunity of change going on in which people may feel a little more nervous. They may be a little bit off kilter in terms of how they feel in terms of the business. There's a lot of people that they may not know that they're dealing with, which is actually a great opportunity for doing any type of intrusion, because it may be brushed off to, oh, well, that's just an employee from the acquisition. I don't recognize that face. They may just be in here for a meeting today. Additionally, while making some of the phone calls, we found that there was an employee that was on extended leave. So they had updated their out-of-office message, doing what they should be doing in terms of a typical business process, that if someone's trying to reach them, they say, hey, listen, I'm out of the office. Please contact this person instead. Otherwise, when I'm back from my leave, I will be happy to return your call. But it gives us an idea of maybe where somebody is in order to find a place to sit. And also the satellite imagery showed that there were several entrances to the building, both in the side and back, that were potentially able to be exploited because there was parking around that area. And then we also knew that the dress code was business casual from doing some local reconnaissance. The other thing you need to do is choose the right time and place. It doesn't make any sense to try to show up at 10:30 in the morning and just walk right in the front door unless you're just testing visitor procedures. A great time to work is at the beginning of the day, lunchtime, and potentially the end of the day, but lunchtime is a great time because you may be able to walk in while someone is walking out. They have their mind off of work and they want to go to lunch, so they may be able to just brush you off a little bit and just ignore the fact that you're walking into the building after they're walking out, or also trying to tailgate when people are returning from lunch in order to see if you can gain access into the building. Also, one of the good strategies is to attempt to tailgate any side entrance, back entrance, something away from where the receptionist typically will be. There most likely will be some sort of badge reader or PIN code access, but if you can either grab the door before it closes or just leave the door open, or when the door's like left open from the person walking in, you just walk in right behind them. There's a lot of different strategies for doing that. I found one thing that works best is to try to beat the person to the front door and be prepared to hold the door for them. They'll badge in, you hold it open. It's almost like you're giving them some way to you're being cordial to them, and they kind of just badge in for you. So it's interesting the way some of this stuff works, but you can try, there's a lot of different tactics that are tried in order to get in. So what happened? Well, there were at least 15 different employees that blocked the tailgate attempts at the side entrances. I mean, and that's great. I mean, good for them. I mean, they were able to block us from getting in. It really showed a great deal of employee awareness. They were able to say, you know what, you don't belong here, or they just looked suspicious at you and pulled the door closed. There were so many things that happened, but consistently, over and over again, the attempts to get into the side entrances were blocked. One of the things that we had noticed is that there was signage at every entrance, and in this particular entrance, it was interesting because they had a poster, and it had a pig with another pig standing on its back, and it said no piggybacking. So it was a constant reminder every time they went into the door, please don't let someone else in unless they're badging in too. And that daily reminder, maybe multiple times a day as they're going in, kind of brought in that mindset of everybody should be badging in. It was part of their process, and it was reinforced. And then in addition, they had their regular training. But this type of information that was given to the employees, it got them in that stance of We are used to having everybody badge in. If somebody else doesn't behind us, it's unusual. We're either going to block them, tell them, sorry, go to the front door, or we're going to just close the door in their face and not let them in. Okay, so the next thing is, well, let's try the main entrance and just see what happens. So there was a successful tailgate at the main entrance. It turned out that it was a vestibule in which a second entrance was required that had another badge, and that was also successfully tailgated, but the employee turned around and said, I noticed you didn't badge. Walk over. I'm going to walk you over here to the receptionist desk and you need to sign in. Okay, so walk over there. What we did is we used some of the information that we had gleaned from the reconnaissance and used that to make up a story. We were a forensics expert that was employed by the company that was acquired. They asked us, because we know you don't have the capability, but we have it, so they asked us to come over here and take a look at this employee's desktop because we had noticed some suspicious activity. They said, okay, sign in, here's a badge. Do you know where you're going? Yes, we know where we're going. We were told already, and they just let us go. So just something simple. You try to avoid at first talking to the receptionist, but sometimes it works if you can make a convincing story. But the question is, was it really that easy? Well, in this case it was, but luck was a major factor. And I will say that for most times that we're doing a penetration test, that there is some element of luck. It just could be a kind of a set of circumstances that happen at that moment that allows you to gain access where at any other time you wouldn't. But I think there were so many things that had happened at this point that it was a major factor in this particular breach. For example, the full-time receptionist at that moment was on a smoking break and had asked a person that was nearby in an office to sit down at the desk and just watch over everything until she came back. Well, it turned out that the person who was watching the desk at that moment when we tried to get in was not trained in proper visitor procedures. And so in particular that the normal receptionist would know that you should always ask for a name of the person that you're visiting, and a visitor would have escort and will not always be given a badge to be able to get in and out of the building. It turned out that the badge that was given was not only inappropriate to give, but it had full access, including the data center. We had tested out that badge in different areas and were able to get to places we weren't supposed to get to. So there was a lack of training that happened in there. So the lesson learned is that there was a window of opportunity. There was several set of changes that made a convincing story, and then also created that that circumstance that allowed the access to occur. So the bigger change was the fact that there was a change to the business. The recent acquisition gave an opportunity for a story that could have had, at least to some extent, some sort of truth to it, or the belief that there was truth to it. And then a minor change that occurred, just something to happen for a 15-minute break, was a receptionist rotation. Somebody else was sitting in at that desk and did not have the appropriate training necessary in order to handle the situation that was coming up. So again, these windows of opportunities do open at different times. It's something to think about in your business. So we can't just go through this story without saying, well, how can you prevent this type of an attack? For this particular instance, for this business, it's first and foremost, continue with the Great Awareness Program. Yes, a breach occurred, but the tests have shown that the employees blocked us at the entrances. They did what they were supposed to do. We noticed appropriate signage. For the most part, this worked. It was better than what we see in most places. But one thing to think about is defining backups for physicians and providing cross-training. Yes, the reception is a key component of physical security for a business. It's just the same thing as if you were going to be training additional backup operators or tape operators if they were to go on vacation, or making sure you have multiple people who understand how to log into the routers to fix an issue if the primary network engineer is on vacation that time or becomes sick. It's really about trying to understand that cross-training is important for a lot of different reasons, some of which are productivity, others are which are security reasons. Additionally, things to think about are anti-tailgate technology. This could be costly depending on the the structure of the building, but there are different types of anti-tailgate technology. Some of which are more physical in means, others are which have a combination of physical and technical measures that could be put in place. Two examples that I could think of right away are the turnstile, allowing one person to go through at each time. It's sized in the way in which someone can go through, and also we'll do a weight check depending on the way they're configured. And it would be able to tell if there's one person or two people trying to go through there, if somebody were able to squeeze in to go through it. The other is a combination of a physical and technical means in which it's not meant to initially stop a person as much as log and take a picture. So it's almost very similar to what you would see walking in and out of a department store. It detects that a person is in there, where there would be a beam that they would break. If it detects two beams but one badge, there's a camera that takes a picture and can also provide an alert. And what it does is it maybe gives it gives a less sense of inconvenience to the employees coming into the building, but gives you the ability to detect that somebody had tailgated in and see a picture of the situation and determine whether or not action needs to be taken. And it ties into what if you didn't prevent it? Looking at those mitigating controls. If you're using a camera and DVR system at entrances and you become aware of someone breaching the building, you can go back and review those. And then also, if you do know that someone is moving around the building, or maybe a badge was given in this situation, understand what badge was given out. Look at the badge access logs and determine what areas have been accessed on that badge so that an appropriate response can be put in place. So there's a detection method, there's a prevention method, and by mixing some of those together and doing those different controls, you can try to reduce the risk as much as possible. So that kind of sums up the physical security story. So the second one we'll talk about is more technical in nature. We call this the domino effect, and we're looking at one password to rule them all. It's not talking about single sign-on. We're talking about one vulnerability to bring everything down. So what was the scenario? We're doing an internal pen test at a medium-sized financial services company, and we're working from a typical conference room. So just sit down, take our laptops, plug it in, go ahead and see if you can break in anything. The scenario is you are a contractor who's working in here doing some programming, but you really don't have any access other than being able to plug into our network. What can you do? So again, there's always reconnaissance. You're looking for low-hanging fruit. Examples of those: SQL servers with bad passwords, maybe an SA account with a null password, or the password of password, or the server name, typical things that we would look for. Is there any web server that's existing internally with a custom application? There could be things like asset inventory systems that we've seen, to any other type of employee portal that's written from a custom standpoint, and there may be some belief that an internal application doesn't have to be tested for security because it's not exposed to the internet. And we also look for web servers with well-known common vulnerabilities and or default configurations to see if there's any way you can exploit that. And in any instance, we don't look like this guy in a ski mask. I just, feel that it's kind of humorous that this is the motif that's typically used in terms of doing penetration tests, but you're not going to see us working in a conference room with a ski mask and a flashlight and say, oh, there's somebody doing a pen test. We just look like normal people sitting in a conference room doing some work. So you really need to see, is there a better way to detect it than looking for somebody who looks like this guy? So just wanted to point that out. But after you're doing reconnaissance, exploit the vulnerability, and if you don't have what you need, you then elevate your access in order to move on. So this is what we try to do in terms of our internal pen test. It's find something. If there's something you believe is vulnerable, exploit that vulnerability. Did you find what you need? No. Either propagate or escalate by elevating your access. So in order to continue with the domino effect, in this particular instance, initial access was through a Lotus Domino server. Looking at the names.nsf file, there were some simple passwords for many users. It was detected that you could log in using the password of password. There's a particular script called Raptor. Using that script, you can give a set of credentials over to the script to connect to the server, and by default access control, you can pull down the password hashes of other users. Even if you don't have access to their particular account, you can get their hashes. And then by running a password cracker program, and in this example, John the Ripper, against the password hashes, an admin user's account was compromised. So by logging in with that admin user, you can log into the webadmin.nsf database, and there's a particular area inside that database in which you can issue commands to a command console. So when you're looking at this, the context of the server is important. Is it running as an account? Is it a local account? Is it a domain account? Or is it running as system, as it is in this particular instance? Because it's running as system, you're able to execute different commands and be able to do things such as create a user, elevate your, create a user, put them in the local admins group, and just perform other functions that you may not be able to do if you're running under a more restricted context. But after that, we look at going into the Windows domain and trying to elevate to the domain level, and that was done through the node server that was compromised. The backup service was running as a domain admin. A lot of times you see an account called backup, put in the domain admin account, or backup exec, or something to that effect like Veritas or Symantec, and you see that account put in the domain admins group because it's easier to perform a lot of the backup operations. So by using those particular methods, we were able to propagate access and gain everything, all through one Lotus user having the password of password. So what are the underlying causes to this particular issue? What we found out through the debriefing process, once we gave the set of results and talked about why this was occurring, until recently the business wasn't even using Domino Internet passwords. Now, the administrators were using it, and they had better passwords that weren't easily guessed, but they were easily cracked. But we had found out that there was a recent beta test of email software for mobile devices that was rolled out. It was kind of a sandboxing technology in terms of mobile device management. And one of the things they had done was for the test user group, they had to set the internet passwords for the users, so they set them to password. And they weren't really using it for anything else other than this, so they never changed the password. And there's two fundamental issues that happen here. First off is that the password management piece is an issue. There wasn't a good password put on. Many users had the same password. Easily could be cracked and guessed. And the other thing is testing on the production system. So there really isn't a way to isolate it because it's already put in place in order to be used for production. So therefore, by introducing the vulnerability and testing on production, it gives you access to all the other production systems. The other one, which may be a little more subtle, is Domino running with system privileges. So once commands were executed as the administrator of Domino, then you're able to become immediately the administrator of the Windows system because it's running with full system privileges. And from there, as I mentioned before, you can either just create another admin user, you can change the passwords of any account so that you can log in remotely via that account, or even just simply shovel a shell back, run a command, run the command prompt, connect it via Telnet, and then run it through your workstation, or do a whole host of other things like upload additional files, download files. So there's so many different things you can do, but it's all running under the system privilege, so you can do a whole host of things that you may not be able to do under any other type of context. So the lessons learned here is that one vulnerability can potentially have catastrophic effect. And quite honestly, it makes the attacker's job a lot more easier than the defensive job, and we very much recognize that. But it's just a matter of trying to have due diligence in terms of trying to create the best defensive posture possible, understanding that one vulnerability can lead to all these different types of access issues or breach or data exfiltration. So another part is that some of these additional vulnerabilities that on the surface don't seem as severe do contribute to the full level of access. The prime example is Domino server running under the context of system. So because of the fact that it was running with that privilege, there was so much that could be done to the system. Whereas if another account was created that only had access to the Domino executable directory and being able to read and write to where the databases were, the damage may have been much less severe. It may have delayed the attacker from being able to try to jump immediately into system. It may have caused something else in terms of monitoring and logging to be detected. And then finally was the account running the backups. That was running as a domain admin, and that particular instance allowed full domain access because of the fact that since that account was running on the server, the passwords have to be maintained inside the registry, and if you have system privileges, you can obtain those passwords. So just a combination of those led to the entire compromise of the Windows domain. So again, how do you prevent this type of attack? Well, first and foremost, set stronger passwords. It would make it more difficult to perpetrate the attack, spending longer time on the network, creating more log entries, just increases the chance of detection. So set stronger passwords, and that would be a great first step. Run services with least privilege. I just mentioned before switching to this particular slide that it would make the attacker's job more difficult by reducing the privilege under which the Domino service was running at that particular instance. The idea is to really just understand what is the minimum set of requirements needed for this particular system to run, and then only give those privileges. And then I write here if possible, but it should be in almost all cases, but I understand some of the limitations that exist in certain business. Isolate your testing environment. Provide as much isolation as possible. Can you recreate the entire environment to be able to test? Hopefully. If not, provide different types of isolation that can be done in order to reduce the attack surface area, and then also what can be accomplished by that particular breach. Like for example, if we know that this particular test environment for the mobile devices could be compromised by putting it within a separate domain, not running the backup service on it with the same context, running reduced privilege, something else may provide the ability to reduce the chances of moving into the Windows domain. And then also, could you detect this type of attack? And it's absolutely, you can. It will be easier with some of the measures that were put above in terms of setting stronger passwords and creating more opportunity for log entries. But robust logging and alerting on that particular unusual activity is the first step to making sure that this attack can be detected. So again, we're looking at some sort of preventative measure, and we're also looking at a detective measure that can be done, just similar to what we were seeing in the physical security story. So there's kind of a theme that we see going on here, which is putting different measures in place in order to help reduce the risk of breach. So let's go into the next story. You know, it doesn't always have to be about, hey, you know, we were able to get in and do something interesting. Let's take a look at a physical security example, and I call it game over, but it's game over for us. So we tailgated an employee through the front door, successful entry into the building, and then we try to find a place to sit, but as you're walking around, there's no cubes that are available, no offices that are available, no conference rooms that are available. The longer it takes you to find a place to go, the greater the chance that there's going to be someone who can see that you're not supposed to be there, because you try to be as inconspicuous as possible, but there are times where maybe the way you're taking a walk around the building or something may raise some eyebrows. So an alert employee came over to me, said, hey, I noticed you don't have a badge, and started asking some questions. And you start deflecting as much as you can. Maybe make up an excuse as to why you don't have it. Oh, I just have my badge in my pocket. Oh, can I see it? Sure. Try to change the subject. Oh, so what do you do here? You know, I haven't seen you before. Just try to build this conversation up and try to talk your way out of it. It didn't really work. They said, listen, I don't think you're supposed to be here. I'm escorting you to the front desk. And that's when the game was over. Caught. You shouldn't be in here. And then you can tell them what you're doing. But in this particular case, it was one employee noticed that I wasn't supposed to be there and moved me on my way to the front desk. Now, I will say in all instances, This may not necessarily be the best situation. Some employees may feel uncomfortable with the direct confrontation, and that's okay. Maybe they just don't like the looks of the person that they see, and it's better to understand where they're going and make a phone call to security or someone who's responsible for any type of the site from the site physical security standpoint, and just alert them to what's coming up, because they may feel that there's a sense of danger, and direct confrontation may not end in a good way. So there always has to be some options. But in this particular case, apparently I didn't appear very threatening, so they came over and started asking me some questions about it. So why was this successful? Well, let's take a look at it. And some of this is very similar to the physical security story that we started off with. But first and foremost, it's still good employee awareness. It's just a matter of they're aware of their surroundings, they know what's going on, they kind of understand who's supposed to be in the building and who's not. And I will say that this can be difficult depending on your business. If you have a lot of contractors that come in and out, there's a particular project that's going on, it kind of ties back to what I had mentioned before in terms of changes that are occurring. You know, for example, we're putting in SAP, and we have a lot of contractors on board, so therefore we may not know everybody who's coming in and out of the building. That creates an opportunity for an attacker to come in. It's just a matter of understanding if that is something that could potentially happen there, and then maybe give additional awareness at that time about badging procedures, making sure that the contractors know that they're supposed to be wearing badges, but different things that help in terms of trying to make sure that there's good employee awareness. In this case, there's noticing that there wasn't a badge, they came over, and understanding that they also play a role in security, implemented what we call the aggressive greeting policy, which is, I'm going to introduce myself. I want to know who you are, what you're doing here, get to know you, and that kind of starts a situation in which you're trying to understand whether or not this person is supposed to be in this building, and then understanding what to do with that next, such as bringing me to the front desk. And again, as I mentioned, aggressive greeting policy may not be appropriate in all situations. So knowing who to contact is also important. Somebody just may not feel comfortable. Know who's the appropriate person to contact. This person is responsible for facilities, or this person is has the physical security responsibility. If there are any questions, you need to call this person, or even just dial a particular extension and report the incident. And again, in addition, company culture can also hold a key part of this, and I can't emphasize that enough. It could be the fact that in the company there's a lot of contractors, like I mentioned before when talking about awareness procedures, but also in terms of people feeling a sense of ownership and empowerment in the company. When establishing that particular culture, it makes it that much easier for the person to want to defend what's going on in the company, take a personal interest in the day-to-day operations and say, this is unusual, I need to report it. And I can't emphasize that enough. If there's complacency, that tends to be when there's an issue that comes up. So, just employee empowerment, awareness, good culture, all of those things do contribute to having a great example in terms of having success against somebody trying to breach the building, or even noticing that they're doing something inappropriate on the technologies. So let's look at part 2 of this, game over. This is an internal pen test example. In this particular situation, we were able to go through the front door, go through the door, and gain successful entry into a building. Walk around, find an empty conference room, go into that conference room, find a network connection, plug into the connection, and you kind of say, all right, it's time to get to work. Let's start breaking into some stuff. We'll do some reconnaissance and see what's out there. Except cell phone rings, and it's my client contact. Hey, I just got a report that you're in conference room X. Really? You know that I'm in conference room X? Wow. Game over in terms of detection. Now, obviously, the project will continue because they want to learn a little bit more about some of their security perspective, but if there were an actual attacker going into the building and trying to break into the network, it would have been over very quickly. And I'm talking within like 5 minutes of sitting down and plugging in. So the question is, how was I found so quickly? And this company had a interesting example of how they did it. All their switch ports had NAC enabled, or network access control enabled. And when a computer was plugged into the network, an SNMP trap was fired over to the management console. And one of the network admins had written a program. Actually, it was written in Perl. It took some of the information about the event, including the MAC address of the device that was plugged in, and did a comparison against the database and said, hey, there's if there was no match inside that database, it created an email alert saying new device plugged in. It had the characteristics about the switch port, and then of course, since they had very good documentation about their network, they didn't have to trace where the switch port went to. They knew that switch port was in this conference room on this wall. So this is unusual. Why is someone plugging into our network? Typically, they get some information about the machine before they come in and have some additional requirements before allowing someone to plug in either a home machine or a contractor machine. So it was pretty quick because they had this particular control in place. So as I mentioned, game over very quickly. So going through that particular story, and going through the ones before, the question you have to ask is, what does all of this mean? And first and foremost is that, unfortunately, it can be easy to gain some level of access into an organization. That's not to say it always happens, but it's those set of circumstances. So, for example, for physical security, it only takes one person to not challenge a tailgater into the building to allow that particular breach of access. And that's why we do talk about the fact that having different layers of security is important, like the anti-tailgating device or some camera or DVR system. From a technical standpoint, one vulnerability, as I mentioned, can gain a foothold to elevate access. But again, there's these other measures that I talked about that can help you in terms of trying to understand if someone's attacking your network. And those things could be IDSs, IPSs, the custom alerting systems, logging and additional alerts that occur because of that. So there's a lot of different things you can do. And the whole gist of it is to say that layered security does work. The theme of this is that there are appropriate preventative measures and detective measures when used with alerting that can help you reduce the risk for your organization. And I can't emphasize that enough. It's not necessarily always about stopping, but if someone is able to do something, that you can quickly sense and respond to that. And that's why both of these measures are important. I think you see a lot of failure because people only try to focus on preventative measures, or they only focus on detective measures. But working on those particular two together, either through different processes, awareness, policies, and technologies that can all be put in place, do allow it to work and reduce that risk surface area for you. So with that, I wanted to open up the phone line.